How's it going, ladies and gents? In this video, we're going to take a look at 8 NBA teams that greatly underachieved in the playoffs. Now, obviously, the NBA has been around for a long time, so we're only going to be looking at recent seasons, let's say since 2010 and up until now. Also, I won't be including teams that suffered some major injuries, like, Derrick Rose's torn ACL. But before we start, I'd like to give a shout out to my sponsor, Hardwood Amino. The Hardwood Amino app is an amazing app for basketball fans. There are polls, quizzes, trivia, a ton of fan-made NBA content, and if you're a fan of the NBA, I recommend checking out the app. Just go on your iOS or Android device and search the App Store for Hardwood Amino. I've been on there a lot more recently, doing quizzes and reading some more articles, so it's a great way for me to interact with my audience as well. The app is simply awesome, and I hope to see some of you there. Download Hardwood Amino today. Alright, let's get started. Number 8, the 2015 Toronto Raptors. The 2014-15 Toronto Raptors finished their season with a 49-33 record, which at the time was their best season in franchise history. They came into the playoffs a little banged up. I think Lowry might have had some issues with his elbow, but they were still going up against a team that they swept in the regular season, the Washington Wizards. Most predicted the Raptors would win the series and move on to the second round, but right when the series started, the Wizards made it known that they were the better team. Shockingly, they swept the Raptors in 4 games, in the most surprising upset in the first round that year. Lowry, DeRozan, and 6th Man of the Year Lou Williams really struggled. They shot a combined 66 for 188 for the series. Those 3 guys were the bulk of the offense during the season and also had the highest usage rates on the team, so shooting that poorly is really bad. The Raptors had the 4th best offense in the regular season, but in the playoffs against the Wizards, their offense was the worst out of every other playoff team that year. Combine that with some lackluster coaching by Dwayne Casey and exceptional play from the Wizards role players like Marcin Gortat and Paul Pierce, and you've got yourselves a sweep. Number 7, the 2016 San Antonio Spurs. I guess I could have put the 2011 Spurs on here too, the year that they lost to the 8th seed, but the fact that the Spurs were even the number 1 seed that year was a huge surprise in the first place. In my opinion, this team, the 2016 Spurs, underachieved even more. This was the year the Spurs won 67 games in the regular season. That was their best record in franchise history, and that says a lot considering how successful their franchise has been. But even so, they still finished number 2 in the West, cause that was the year the Warriors won 73 games. By the time the playoffs rolled around, the number 1 seeded Warriors and the number 2 seeded Spurs were on a collision course to meet in the conference finals. Unfortunately for the Spurs, they ran into a juggernaut. The 2016 Oklahoma City Thunder. This Thunder team featured a healthy Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, who both had some amazing games in the series. But what ultimately killed the Spurs was their rebounding. Going by total rebounding percentage, the Thunder this season were statistically the best rebounding team in NBA history, and it definitely showed in this series. They out-rebounded the Spurs by an average of 9 rebounds in every game. Steven Adams, Enes Kanter, and the entire team killed them on the glass. Additionally, this was the first playoff series where Tim Duncan actually looked really old. Duncan easily had the worst series of his entire career, averaging just 6 points and 4 rebounds a game, and he retired a couple of weeks after the season was over. The Spurs front court was just very slow and way less athletic than the Thunder's front court, and after their best regular season ever, they were sent home very quickly in the second round. Number 6, the 2015 Atlanta Hawks. In the 2014-15 season, the Hawks were the biggest surprise contender in the entire league. They won 60 games after winning only 38 games in the previous season, and they were able to do this without any huge changes to the team. They played a style of basketball that was very fun to watch, and most fans call them the Spurs of the East. They grabbed the first seed in the East, and after winning their first 2 rounds of the playoffs, they got swept by the Cavaliers in the conference finals. Granted, Korver missed 2 games in that series because of injury, but overall the team performed very poorly and looked nothing like the 60-win team that we saw in the regular season. Their ball movement took a dive, and they actually had less total assists than the Cavs for the entire series. Paul Millsap was their best player, but he did not show up, and the Hawks just could not stop LeBron either. LeBron averaged 30, 11, and 9 for the series, and the entire Cavs team was basically on fire from 3. Defensively, they were able to shut down the Hawks' offense, and rebounding was also a crucial factor in this series. In the 4-game sweep, the Hawks only averaged 39 rebounds per game, as opposed to the Cavs' 52. Although the Hawks were not favored in this series, they didn't even win a single game, which was a huge surprise. Very few 60-win teams have gotten swept in the playoffs, and unfortunately, the Hawks were one of them. Number 5, the 2011 Miami Heat. Alright, I had to put this Miami Heat team on this list. Yes, it was LeBron's first year in Miami, and they rolled through the Eastern Conference playoffs. They were 12-3 in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs and won every series in 5 games. This also included victories against the Boston Celtics and the 62-win Chicago Bulls, 2 teams that were very, very good, and the Heat defeated them quite easily. But then, everything fell apart in the finals. With a chance to lead the series 2-0, they blew it. The Mavs made a furious comeback and tied the series 1 game apiece, and afterwards, Dirk, Jason Terry, and JJ Barea would lead the team to their first ever NBA championship. The Heat were heavily favored going into this series, and this was one of the few times LeBron's team was actually favored in the finals. Yet, they were still not able to win, even though D-Wade was amazing. LeBron had the worst series of his career, averaging just 18 points. Overall, he was very passive and deferred way too much to his teammates. During the series, LeBron also only averaged about 2 points per game in the 4th quarter, which was abysmal. His poor performance in the 2011 finals also sparked all of those 4th quarter memes. Remember these? Yeah, it was a tough time for LeBron, but hey, at least he bounced back. Still, when looking back through LeBron's career, this series will always leave a blemish on his legacy. Number 4, the 2014 Oklahoma City Thunder. The 2014 Thunder were one of the many OKC teams with Durant and Westbrook, yet still failed to win the championship. This version of the Thunder was very good, one of their best teams during that era. Westbrook missed about half the season to recover from knee surgery, but when he returned, he looked just as good as before. But what made this team so good was their bench. Reggie Jackson was a legitimate candidate for 6th Man of the Year, and Jeremy Lamb had his best season in OKC. On top of that, Durant won the MVP, averaging a career-high 32 points a game on a ridiculous 64% true shooting percentage. The team won 59 games in that season, but struggled a bit in the first few rounds of the playoffs. Eventually, they still made it to the Western Conference Finals. The Thunder matched up against the Spurs, who they actually swept during the regular season, 4-0. But unfortunately, they ran into a Spurs team that was on a mission. As you all know, the 2014 Spurs were out for revenge after losing in the finals the previous year, and they played as well as any team I've ever seen. In Game 6, the Thunder had a couple of chances to win, but turnovers and a few timely shots by the Spurs ultimately led to their downfall. This version of the Thunder would be one of many Thunder teams with Durant and Westbrook that could not win a title. Number 3, the 2016 Golden State Warriors. I can't make a video about underachievements without mentioning the 2015-16 Golden State Warriors. 73 wins, best record of all time, and they blew a 3-1 lead in the finals. Well, even before the finals, the Warriors had a very rough time in the conference finals. At one point, they were down 3-1 against a very good Thunder team, but they were able to claw themselves back into the series and eventually finished the comeback. Of course, it was a completely different story in the finals. Maybe a few things here and there that could have prevented that collapse, like Draymond not getting suspended or Bogut not getting injured. But either way, they were heavily favored to win the title and probably had the best odds in finals history after being up 3-1, yet they still lost. Number 2, the 2010 Cleveland Cavaliers. This was LeBron's last playoff run during his first stint with the Cavs. During that time, the questions about whether he would stay in Cleveland or leave in free agency in the summer, that was pretty much the biggest story in the NBA. Despite leading his team to 61 wins and winning the regular season MVP, LeBron and the Cavs quickly saw another early playoff exit to the Boston Celtics. At one point, the Cavs were up 2-1, but then they lost 3 straight games and lost the series. LeBron would get criticized a lot for his performance in the last 3 games because it looked like he was very uninterested in winning. Cavs owner Dan Gilbert, who's probably not the best person to quote, but he said LeBron quit during the playoffs, especially in Game 6 where the Cavs lost by 32 points and LeBron only took 14 shots. Afterwards, LeBron would leave Cleveland, Dan Gilbert would write an angry letter in Comic Sans, and fans would burn his jerseys, and yeah, that was it. And number 1, the 2015 Los Angeles Clippers. Yes, the 2015 Los Angeles Clippers are number 1 on this list. When we talk about underachieving, the Clippers are basically the definition of that word in recent years. During the Chris Paul, Blake Griffin era, they've never got past the second round even once. Now, some of it had to do with injuries, but other times they flat out shrunk under the pressure. The Clippers eliminated the defending champion Spurs in the first round of the 2015 playoffs, and it made everyone realize that this could be their year. The team looked amazing in the playoffs and everything was clicking. In the second rounds, they even managed to get a 3-1 lead over the Houston Rockets. And that's where everything went downhill. As the Clippers were on the brink of reaching the conference finals, the basketball gods were like, "No, you're the Clippers. You don't deserve good things." So Josh Smith decided to turn into Michael Jordan and led the Rockets to a furious comeback in Game 6. And of course, the Clippers would lose 3 straight games, and once again, they were unable to get past the second round. And that's all, folks. Those were 8 NBA teams that greatly underachieved in their respective seasons. Let me know if you think there's any other teams that belong on this list. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.